Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other topic that I propose would be getting into more detail on definitions as modeled by what did we definitional claims. Maybe we could talk a little more about, go into details on a definitional claim. What is a definitional claim? How it's structured, how it's made, that sort of thing.
I do think my work on definitions is relevant to that, so I wouldn't mind exchanging days with you, and then we could dig. You could take over tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, it would be me taking over by letting you present, which is fine. Yeah, we could do the user stories process today. That's fine.
No, it wasn't. I have a slew of new definitions, and I'd like to run them by you. And they imply all kinds of user stories, which I'll have to ad lib because I didn't write them yet. But it's me trying to clarify some vocabulary and trying to make the bridges. And I think it will enable us to go deeper into the definition of definitional claim. And ask a few interesting questions about those.
And you're ready to do that today?
To be clear, Timothy, the suggestion is you take tomorrow, and then today's my one, if I understand correctly.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Okay, go ahead. I'm fine with that.
I think, yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it. Is that the one? Yes, that's the one. So, definitions, bunch of them. I have defined a few things that maybe didn't need defining, but I went from scratch. So we have Communication Act, emitter, receiver. I'll go very quickly over some of those because it's PRC and stuff I've gone over many times, but I'm being a bit more precise with words. Symbol and context, any communication act or part thereof that is both intended to and can be interpreted as standing for some concept. Here, actually, I should also have a name for some meaningless symbols. It'll come up. But let's say right now that symbols are meant to stand for a concept. Concept is defined later, but it's about the PRC and triangles. So we've been through that. Stripped symbol, that's kind of a bit like the immutable symbol, as symbol in context, but with the context stripped, provenance stripped. Interpretation is broader. Sometimes interpretation is impossible. If there are indexical references, there may be other cases where interpretation is impossible in a stripped symbol, whereas it would be possible in the original symbol in context. And when I say symbol, I mean both of them, stripped or symbol in context. It's a union class. They're profoundly different objects, but most of, obviously the unadorned text part of their claims would go in the stripped symbol category. Concept, now I'll try to really restrict it to wetware. The interpretation of a symbol in the mind of the emitter and receptors of a communication act. Concepts includes individual, classes, predicates, claims, and arguments, and that's irrelevant to what follows.
Is it a classically called an idea? Does it overlap with the traditional notion of idea?
Yes, totally. It's that, it's that point of the semiotic triangle.
Mm-hmm.
I will add AKA idea. Topics, and here I'm going to, this is not exactly the meaning of topic mapping, but I need a name and I'm reusing topic, AKA subject proxy, that I used to say, oh, it's like the concept, it stands for the concept. Well, it stands for the concept, but it is not the concept. So this is the immutable data structure, again, not immutable in topic mapping. So this is my thing, intended to represent the concept. Now, this is true of symbols too, but topics are different, and I'll go into how they can be different. Topics ideally should have a natural language label, which is a symbol.
Wait, can you slow down a bit here?
Yeah,
this
okay,
one this is an essential distinction, right?
This is
I'm trying
absolutely
to understand the essential distinction between topic and symbol.
Yes, this is where we're getting, absolutely. A topic, like a symbol, is a piece of language, except it's a data structure, it's more formal language sometimes, which is intended to represent a concept. So that way it's not unlike a symbol. But ideally, a topic should have a natural language label. Not always the case. We could imagine a topic which is pure formal. And maybe the formal has never been expressed as natural language. Maybe the formal system is not even a symbolic language.
So the interpretation is somehow made.
The artist formerly known as Prince.
As what?
The artist formerly known as Prince. Formerly known as Prince.
Okay, what about that? That's a symbol, and it could be also a topic, and I'm getting there.
But you write concept is the interpretation of a symbol. So I'm guessing what makes a topic is that the interpretation is added. But you don't define yet here how or.
No. I'm not saying that the interpretation is added in the topic.
Okay, sorry, I thought so because it says intended to represent a concept, and a concept is the interpretation of a symbol. So yeah. If topic represents a concept, I figured then the interpretation should be included.
The interpretation is between symbols and topics, or between topics and topics. And in the system, in wetware, symbols and topics are interpreted as concepts, but we never have concepts. They only exist in the brain. So I cannot represent the concept in the topic. I cannot represent the concept interpretation, and I should probably name that as a concept. I should probably give that a name, the concept interpretation. But that is.
So the problem is that the only thing you refer to in the definition is concept. So it's all I have to go by. So if it's not that, and you say you cannot represent it, then my conclusion is then you cannot represent the topic either. So I'm still clueless what topic is according to this definition.
Okay, good question. No, a topic is a representation that, like a symbol, is intended to be interpreted by a person as a concept. But what the topic is it's a representation. How is it not exactly a symbol? I'll get into that. But take it as a symbol for a special symbol for now. A symbol with structure. Let me put it, a data structure.
So you're implying then that a symbol doesn't have structure, but I didn't see that in the definition of symbol either.
That's correct. That's correct. Symbol is a communication act or part thereof. That's the symbol in context, and or the contextual stripping of a symbol in context. So that's the definition of symbol.
So you're pretty much arguing, and I'm afraid I'll have to refer to adornments here, which is not in this list, but you're pretty much arguing that if you attach a definition, because that's not part of the communication act, the extra communication act just uses the word, and you don't consider like it to be a communication act. For example, when you say Paris is nice, and by Paris I mean the city, the whole communication act is the whole piece of text at that point, and we're
getting closer though. Of course,
you're essentially arguing that the structure you're talking about is not part of the communication act.
Correct.
Okay.
Of course, one could have a communication act that states a definition, in which case the definition is part of the communication act. But in general, when you speak of what we call an adorn, let's speak 2 seconds about adorned, then that would be linking, saying the topic Paris, France, coordinates, blah, 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 which would be a data structure. It could be like for example, the Wikidata box of the Paris,
Yeah.
and then attaching that to the Paris string and the symbol Paris is nice. So this is part of the interpretation of Paris is nice. I'm saying
I understand you now. Just a caveat that, I mean, this of course all depends on how you model it, how you structure it. So these definitions depend on implementation details, if you will, the way I understand it right now. But I understand the intent. So I think for on my part, we can continue and I get the distinction.
Okay. I don't know that it depends on implementation details. I'm saying topics is a data structure. There can be thousands of different data structures.
Which is an implementation detail, no?
That is an implementation detail, but I'm saying having, being a data structure, I don't think it's an implementation detail.
I think it is, because I would argue that data structures can be part of a communicative act, essentially.
Fair enough. I see what you're saying. Okay.
But I don't think we have to deviate into this discussion. For the sake of like understanding these definitions, I can follow.
Okay, good. Now it's possible that the natural language label is all there is to the topic. There is the city in France. Let us call those minimal topics. There's no data structure besides the language. Now, that's obviously functionally equivalent to the symbol. I'm still keeping it separate from the symbol, and this is where the argument lies, and I'll get into that. But the idea is that there is an intent to define minimally, whereas symbols kind of require context for their definition and kind of can remain ambiguous and it doesn't matter, whereas topics aim for minimal ambiguity. Doesn't mean they achieve it, but they aim for it.
Interesting. In that sense, it does partially overlap maybe with acceptable immutable claim.
Yeah, it's towards there, yeah. And I make the correspondence much later. So there's minimal topics, that is topics which consist only of a natural language label, a symbol, whose only component in the structure is a symbol, and can almost be identified with it. For reasons that will become obvious, it's not obvious. And I'm using the name rich topics for non-minimal rich topics. And I'm not getting into what the structure is yet. Symbols and concepts stand in many-to-many relation, we know that. And that relation will be called symbol interpretation. Interpretation suggests a process in the mind of the receptor, but I also include the expression process in the mind of the emitter. But let's call it, we have symbol interpretation is a relation between a symbol and a concept. And oh, sorry, I should call that which is distinct then because it's not about the concept, is an explicit relation between a symbol and a topic. This symbol can be interpreted as this concept represented by this topic. So that is it's a relation. There may be multiple interpretations for symbol. Multiple symbols can be interpreted as the same topic. So that's the many-to-many part. So that's between symbols and topics. Now it's possible the topic is a simple symbol, in which case it would probably be a paraphrase. Like for example, Paris symbol can be interpreted as there is the city in France, simple topic, or the Wikidata identity of Paris, France, which would be another totally different structure of topic. And those would be two interpretations of Paris, the symbol, and of course, the Wikidata identity of Paris, Texas. There may be multiple interpretations for symbols, blah, blah, many-to-many. There's also a topic interpretation relation that exists at the topic level. That's saying that a topic with a certain description can be interpreted as having the same meaning as another topic with a different description.
Hold on here.
Haha, yeah, we're getting there.
Wait, are symbols singletons? Are they unique? As in, like,
Yeah.
you only have one Paris, or at least capital P Paris?
Yep.
Okay.
Totally.
What do you mean with a certain description?
Part of the structure. The
Is
topic.
it the label you mentioned, a natural language label, or because this wasn't mentioned anywhere else?
You're right. This is not defined. So catch. Let me just for now, and I think we'll proceed better without it.
Because I don't see that difference. You're essentially almost saying that topics are symbols, or you're more like saying that the topic interpretation relation is really the interpretation of the symbol of that topic to another topic.
No, okay, good.
I don't understand 158. Let's put it that way. Line 150.
Yeah, I understand. Let me elaborate. If I think of let's say I can have a totally non-symbolic topic, such as a point in vector space, semantic vector space. That's a non-symbolic topic. I can say that this point in this vector space can be interpreted as QID of Paris, France in Wikidata, can be interpreted as the phrase Paris, the capital of France. And those are interpretation relations between
what
topics.
Is a symbol here in this example? What would the symbol be?
I'm making the point that there need not be a symbol. I'm saying there's an interpretation relation between topics that does not rely on symbol interpretation. There's two distinct interpretation relations.
Can you scroll up a bit?
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm struggling there, I guess, what it means for a topic that doesn't have anything.
It doesn't not have anything. It has a structure. It
only has structure, which is not a symbol.
It has enough information to attempt to identify a concept. Now, that information can take all kinds of forms, some of which are non-symbolic, like the point in the semantic vector space.
Yeah, it's related to what you call structure and not structure, right? Okay, but so you're saying it doesn't have a communicative act, essentially, although you can attach like a natural language label, which I guess is a communicative act regardless. Yep. But then there's no symbol other than that. There's only structure.
That's one case. What I'm saying is a topic is a data structure which has the intent of designating a concept as unambiguously as possible. Other than that, I'm saying nothing about what the structure is. It's a black box. I'm saying it's a data structure, it's a computer science data structure, and it has an intent. I'm not saying how it's built.
And it may have symbols as well, or not?
It may have symbols or not.
Okay.
As part of the structure.
Then I get it. I mean, for me, it highlights a flaw because you have the exact same action on symbol and topic, but maybe that will become clear later. Okay, well, but so I think that explains it. So, okay, there's only structure, there's no symbol, hence you can also reinterpret the topic. Yes, okay.
Okay, but you're right. It is in that way, the symbol interpretation relation could be interpreted as a special case of a topic interpretation relation where both topics are simple topics, that is, are only their natural language label.
without any additional structure. Yeah.
Exactly. So you could do that.
Mm-hmm.
When two topics are mutually interpretable, we can say they're equivalent. So there's an equivalence class. Well, I'll get back to the equivalence class later. Or two topics can be said to be distinct. I don't want to say that distinction is the absence of equivalence. It's a relation. It's an explicit relation. And ideally, this relation should ideally specify how they're different. For example, distinguishing property. Maybe that's too much to ask. I'm still unsure about that, but I'm certain it has to be explicit. Distinct topics cannot be equivalent, obviously, and vice versa. Equivalent topics cannot be distinct. But if a topic is neither distinct nor equivalent, it means we don't know.
When you say they cannot be, you mean that it would be an invalid state if you were to model these definitions. It would be an invalid state. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Distinct, but it's possible that if you have two distinct topics, one can be a valid interpretation of the other, but not the other way around. That's a valid state. Mm-hmm. And then we'd say that the second topic is narrower than the first. Mm-hmm. So it's a. Yeah. And finally, I'm coming to an end with the definitions. When a topic is interpreted as a distinct topic, but not the other way around, we can say, between two topics. Definitions. Between two, and that is curation, and maybe it's out of scope, but between two equivalent topics, we may say one definition is clearer than another, an improved definition, clarification relation between topics. And here, it doesn't matter what the structure of the topic is. I can find the formal more clear than the informal or vice versa. And if two moderators disagree on the direction of clarification, then we have alternative definitions. Maybe we want to distinguish the case where alternative definitions are redundant versus mutually enriching. Having multiple definition is perfectly fine. It's not an anti-goal. For example, we can have multiple formal, multiple natural languages, expert versus layperson language, and so on.
Question here: why do you introduce, like, what is your choice for, like, in the distinct mapping and equivalent mapping to allow for illegal state, but here you can allow multiple conflicting relations essentially? Like, why do you consider moderation and curation in one, but not in the other?
Good question. I just didn't get there. The question of conflicting states in the interpretation relation, I did not treat yet. So simply not there yet. Whereas for definitions, I feel it's a bit inherent to the definition relation to consider it. I think let me put it this way. I think that it's very likely that there will be good faith disagreement about the clarity relation. Whereas I think in the interpretation relations, if we arrive at conflicting state, it's probably a mistake.
I think it has to do with the user stories you have in mind, but I think I can follow.
Yeah. A clarification will often end up to be effectively narrower than the original, breaking the equivalence. That's not always true, but sometimes true. If I have a definition, I make a clearer definition, I will probably find out, oh, actually, it excludes a border case of the unclear one. So there's actually, it's actually narrower, it's not equivalent anymore. That's just process. Two other independent relations between topics that are worth mentioning. Refinement. This is the subclass. Cats and mammals, for example. And composition. If I say Paris is nice, Paris is a component of the Paris is nice claim. Whether I'm speaking and here I'm speaking at the topic level. Paris is nice, interpreted as a topic, and suppose it's clear. Paris, the capital of France, is full of beautiful monuments and an aesthetic pleasure to visit. So here it's supposed to be clear. Let's say it's natural language only. And here I'm seeing a component of that is Paris, the capital of France. Again, unambiguous or minimally ambiguous topic. I'm considering both as topics.
Yeah,
so
I get composition, but I'm wondering about refinement and the overlap, or what was previously written as, we can say, the second topic is narrower than the first. When a topic is interpreted as a distinct topic, is not similar.
No, it is not. Okay, that's very important. Good, you brought it up, because it's actually capital soon. In the case of refinement, let's say cats and mammals. Cats and mammals, cats is a refinement of mammal. It's not even the same symbol. There's no danger of saying that cat is an interpretation of mammals, right? It's nobody will think of, oh, he just means cats when he says mammals. Whereas a lot of people will use animal and mean mammals and not include reptiles and birds. So mammals is an actual, both a refinement and a narrowing of animals. And you can have you can have narrowings that are not refinements. The narrowing between Paris and Paris, France, there's no abstract class that corresponds to Paris, France, and Paris Hilton, for example. So this is not a refinement. This is just a narrowing. Okay, and this is really the key notion, is the notion of ambiguity. When a topic T is narrowed as two or more mutually distinct topics, then the topic T is ambiguous, unless the topic is also interpretable as the abstraction of those topics.
Mm-hmm.
The abstraction may not exist, like in Paris, France, Paris Hilton, or it may not be a valid interpretation. Like you would not use, maybe it exists, but you would not use that.
All things called Paris and named Paris.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the case where the abstraction does not exist. Not
well, no, it could be, but it's a useless. You would say it doesn't exist, but suppose someone wants to just refer to all things named Paris by saying Paris.
Yeah,
like nouns with the word Paris.
And
I got it.
But not be a valid interpretation is a distinct case. I haven't found a case of that, but in theory, I could imagine a word that can be interpreted as two distinct concepts. One or the other, they have a common abstraction, but that common abstraction would never be named with the name of the original topic. Let's say the original topic is symbol, so let's say it's symbol for it's only its symbol for argument's sake. It's got two. I don't have a case. Sorry, I'll look for one. It has two narrower, ambiguous interpretations. Those two have a meaningful abstraction, but that abstraction has a totally different name. I don't know if that case exists, but in theory, it could. In general, refinement and narrowing need not coincide, but when they do, the ambiguity is benign. That's what I'm saying. The case of okay, that's I should have a case of that too, and I don't have one. But basically, this word could be either the abstraction or one of the special cases. That's fine. It could mean the abstraction. So it's not such that it's ambiguous, it's that there are narrowings, and we should know whether we're speaking about the narrowings or the general case, but it's not, we could say here we mean the general case, and that's fine. Of course, ambiguity is more likely for minimal topics than for rich topics, yet even fully formalized topics can turn out to be ambiguous. Okay, and here, the point is most of the interesting relations between topics should be between unambiguous topics. And this is why I had to introduce refinement. Relations of interpretation, refinement, and composition should have non-ambiguous topics as their target, refinement and composition should also have non-ambiguous topics as their source. Since a topic can become ambiguous after the fact, because we found a new interpretation after the fact, it means that newly identified ambiguity in a topic cascades along those relations. Those relations become tainted by ambiguity and need revision. And that probably means we need to be able to say this relation is replaced by this one. But that's less important. What's really important is if I have something that's interpreted as that topic was not ambiguous, becomes ambiguous, I'll want to revisit the interpretation to say, okay, which one do I mean? So I will know that this interpretation relationship has become unclear, tainted. Same if I say this is a part of that. Oh, which one do you mean? Okay, I'll have to redraw, like say, okay, this relation is now invalid, and actually I meant this special case, and so on.
But it doesn't always require that, right?
It doesn't always
be
require
ambiguity, but the ambiguity doesn't affect, to use claims, right? When we're talking about the claim doesn't change based on that ambiguity.
Well, my point is that the cases where the claim doesn't change, all benign ambiguity, which I'm excluding from ambiguity. When
okay,
I say
that's what I also was confused by. I think these definitely need different names because this is highly ambiguous. So when refinement and narrowing coincide, it's not ambiguous.
yeah, which is way, unless the topic is also interpretable as the abstraction of those topics. That is when refinement and narrowing coincide. This is the same case. And then that means I'm saying the apparent ambiguity. Let's call it apparent ambiguity, it'll be clear.
So in the case, an abstraction points to a more narrow abstraction.
So I have a term which, or a topic, which can be much more elaborate, but it doesn't matter. And there's part of that topic can be partitioned into subcases. And it's not always clear whether the term means either of the cases or both of them, right? Then I'll say it's not that ambiguous because let's assume it means both of them. And if we want to have the separate subcases, let them be other topics. That's fine. And those are the narrowing relations, they're explicit, but the broader topic is assumed to refer to the abstraction if it exists and is meaningful and is a valid interpretation of those terms. And I'm restricting like this is basically, I'm restricting what's a harmful ambiguity that we need to propagate as opposed to benign ambiguity, and which is what you were raising, Tim, that sometimes the ambiguity in a component term need not propagate to the claim. And I'm saying, well, pretty much the only case where it doesn't propagate to the claim, it's probably because we're fine allowing the either case. I'm trying
that's possibly true. I have to think through different possibilities, but
maybe wrong, of course.
Yeah, but the thing is that who decides the propagation? It's not an something that can be automatically determined, right? Each step of the propagation is going to need to be decided by the community.
I think that the propagation should be automatic, but resolution of the propagation should be community. Like we should have automatically, hey, this relation is tainted. Please someone fix it. So the propagation should be automatic, but the resolution is community. Yes, I doubt it can ever be automatic. I think there are cases where it'll be very simple because the ambiguity is a very rare case. And so we might be able to do bulk operations, but I'd still want a human to review stuff. Yeah. So that's really the key intuition I thought was worth all those definitions. And now the other thing is you were speaking about, and which is why I insisted to present today, an equivalence class of mutually equivalent topics defines a mutable topic family. I don't have a better claim, but I think it's what you were calling a canonical concept earlier.
I try to, yeah.
Yeah, it would ideally be represented as one or more maximally clear topics in the class using clarification relation. That's when we display it to a user.
Why mutable?
It's mutable because we can always define new either equivalence relations that will increase the family or distinctions that will partition it.
Okay, so the equivalence class is not materialized, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Well, I don't know if we materialize it or not, but we probably will cache it. But I have given up giving an external identifier to those classes. External meaning referenceable. As they're too fluid. It's also, I think,
the concept is mutable. The concept, forget about implementation details.
Yeah.
By definition,
Just
it's
say
mutable
it's-
because you can add additional things in the equivalence clause. That's why it's mutable.
Yeah.
So instead of mutable, you could say implicit. Maybe that's better.
Changing.
Yeah, but anyways, yeah.
What do you mean by implicit?
It's implicitly defined. There's no concrete definition of that equivalence class because it's implicitly defined by its members.
Yeah, you mean because you have the equivalence relations. So it's defined by the equivalence relations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is said earlier. And now, and another conclusion, which is going to be controversial. This is why I think that refinement and composition relations between topics is best drawn between topics and not between topic families, which would be otherwise ideal. We want the refinement and composition to be between topic family because that in a way corresponds better to concepts, but that's too fluid. So I say, let's do that between topics, calculate the equivalence class or cache the equivalence class, and then when the equivalence class let's say gets split, then the relation will follow one of them and we'll have to revisit 1 second what happened to that other part. And we'll have to keep a history maybe. But I think that since I don't believe in that I'm able to find a stable identity for the equivalence class, I'm saying let's just take a topic which has a fixed identity, it's immutable, its hash serves as an identity, that's an anchor, and then we can look at its equivalence neighborhood on the spot. We'll find a best representative so far is this, and we'll attach things to that.
Exactly. I think the main purpose of topic families here will serve different user stories. It's more like by mapping that, it can help you improve other maps. Essentially, it can help you find which new relations need to be drawn elsewhere, etc.
Right. And then finally, the isomorphism is the distinction between minimal topic and symbol as important as I make it. Is there a fundamental difference between topic interpretation and symbol interpretation? There are two ways to do the architecture, which are isomorphic, the one where I propose where we keep them distinct, or we erase a difference, and meaningful symbols are a special case of simple. Only a subset of symbols, those that are meaningful, for example, excluding indexical stripped symbols. I think that's more difficult. And there's other reasons why I prefer keeping a hard distinction. Symbols are almost always ambiguous. So it precludes the refinement and composition relation. Maybe we haven't found the ambiguity yet. Keeping symbols and topics distinct, it's easier to say that the refinement and composition only apply to topics. Let's not even try to apply them to symbols.
But more importantly, I don't understand. That's the question I started with. Why are symbols relevant at all? Why aren't they only topics? I mean, none of what you presented here requires symbols.
The interpretation, the symbol interpretation relation requires symbols. It's between symbols and topics explicitly. Now, is it required? I think that the entry point will always be symbols.
You can also have interpretations between topics.
Yes,
Why
that's
not?
correct.
So if
That's correct. I'm saying that's a distinct relation. Well,
it's distinct because you define symbol as distinct. My question is why are you defining symbol as distinct?
Exactly the argument I'm going over here. And I agree, it's isomorphic. I don't have a good reason, except I find it clearer. I don't have a distinguishing reason, except I find it clearer. Right? It's all about, and you're allowed to say you find yours clearer, and that's perfectly fine.
Well, I think you find it clear because of what you call data structure formalized, so like all these things that you gloss over. I think you have some ideas there that distinguishes symbols in a meaningful way from topics. For some reason, you find that distinguishing meaningful. But if you can't pinpoint why that with or without formalization matters in any of the other definitions, I don't understand why the distinction is necessary.
Okay. There's two things. First, obviously, rich topics and symbols are disjoint. The question is, are simple topics, that is, topics whose structure is only a symbol, finally, is it important to distinguish simple topics from symbols? Maybe not. I think it's conceptually clearer in that it helps keep in mind the intent of topics, that topics are intended to aim towards unambiguity, which is not even a goal for symbols. Symbols are never expected to be unambiguous. Topics are. Of course, they aren't all, but they're all aiming to be. There's a whole process to carve out what it means for a symbol to be unambiguous. Now, of course,
Isn't this your symbol in context? Because I'm not arguing that symbol in context is useless.
No, it's symbol as a union class of symbol in context and strip symbol.
I'm pretty certain I can rewrite all of this and strip symbol out of there, and all of this is still readable and conveys the same thing you just said. That's what I'm wondering.
That's absolutely true. When I say it's isomorphic, that is what I mean.
Why add additional definitions if they're not necessary?
Because I think they add to understanding. I think the stripping them strips an important distinction and leads to more confusion.
No, but you say it's important, but apparently it's not important to understand everything that's written here. So I'm asking, why is it important?
I'm saying there's a philosophical distinction. It's not an operational distinction, but it's a philosophical distinction. And it's harder to argue for the philosophical distinction if I don't have a separate term.
Well, it's hard. It's interesting to call it a philosophical distinction, because the only distinction you've drawn so far between symbol and topic is some formalized stuff, which is more of an implementation detail than a philosophical distinction.
Wrong. It's objectively wrong.
Okay.
That is the distinction between rich topic and simple topic. The distinction I'm drawing here is intent. Topics aim to be minimally ambiguous. This is not expected of symbols.
Okay, then, yeah.
And the other thing is, a lot of the relationships make sense on topics in general, but make very little sense on symbol, and hence on simple topics. Though we will do them on simple topics sometimes, but only insofar as simple topics, but they will very rarely work on simple topics, because we'll find multiple interpretations almost unerringly.
So again, I understand the distinction in the intent, but how is that different from symbol in context? Because symbol in context doesn't have to be a topic either, right? So your symbol in context can be whatever, and then you make relations from those two topics.
Oh yeah, that's interesting actually, because
so I'm essentially saying, why aren't symbols just symbols in context always? And why isn't that just, because we already concluded a symbol is essentially a communicative act. It represents the communicative act. So why not just be the communicative act itself, the piece of text in context, the video, the whatever.
There you do have a very interesting point, is that when I say an immutable topics should always have a natural language label, this should be a context. So
I mean, symbols seems to represent some data format-ish that you support, that create some base types that you want to support, that you want to add some formalisms to. All of this for me screams implementation detail.
No, it isn't. It really isn't. It's the genesis. But it is where I will agree. It's a process distinction. Where do symbols come from? Where do topics come from? They arise through totally different processes. So it's not an implementation detail, but it is slightly genesis dependent. I will admit that much.
And my intuition is symbols will arise by highlighting them in context. And then you have the subset of the symbol in context, which you call symbol essentially, which is the raw data or whatever that you then store in a topic, which is a stripped symbol, I guess.
Right. Okay, so you know what? I will rewrite this with stripped symbol as a special case of topic, because
oh, well, I don't think it matters. I understood what you wanted to say. The refinement, the distinction between refinement and narrowing is the most relevant one, I think, of this presentation, which we already played around with a bit. It's like a mix of category theory plus interpretation, I guess. Does category have a narrowing, like interpretation? Actually,
no, it has everything and nothing. It has what you put in it. No, seriously, it's abstraction of everything. Could I express this in category theory? I'm not good enough a categorician. Is it possible? Certainly.
But how does this help us with definitions for tomorrow? With the last 6 minutes, because that's why we started doing this first.
Yes, absolutely valid. Well, I think the one thing I really wanted to get into is the claim that if we're building definitions, meaning the topics, they are not, how should I put it? The relations are between topics and not topic families, which is counterintuitive. I'm unasking the question of finding a topic family signature and doing relation between topic families. And I thought that was worth doing.
Maybe first specify how definitions fit into the picture here. My intuition is that definitions are essentially composition concepts. Like that's a topic that uses composition to include another concept, which is probably a definition. But
okay, good.
Not stated.
Perfectly valid question. A topic tries to designate a concept. It may do so with a label. It may do so by adding a definition to the label, or you may consider the topic data structure as a whole as a way to define the concept. I'm saying in a way, topics are definitions. They're not always expressed as definitions. They're not always expressed as linguistic definitions, but they play the role of a definition in that they try to
so natural language label is not just a piece of text. It's more. What are you saying then?
No, it's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Recall that natural label is a frequent but optional property of topics. Topics is, think of topics as definition. We may
Should
try
have
to
a natural. I thought it was mandatory. Oh well, no. Ideally should have. Okay.
Yeah, it's not mandatory. I think it all probably mandatory. Maybe it would be better if, but I'm willing to waive that. What is important to me is that it's an attempt to designate a concept as unambiguously as possible. Whether it does so, and in that sense, it is a definition. Whether it does so through label, long-winded definition, text definition like in an encyclopedia.
Yeah, but where does that go? I think that's the definition and the relation to symbols and what adornments are, I think, is the whole thing that's missing here.
Okay. What I'm saying is, when I say a topic can be any structure, it means it can be any structure. It can be, here's a label. It can be, here's a label and a definition. Here's a point in a vector space. Here's a definition in a point in a vector space. Here's adornments of text.
So how can we then have a topic
adornments.
claim which has a definition? Like what would that, how would you express that using this language?
Topic claim which has a definition. I'm not sure what you mean by definition. I've explained what I mean by definition.
Paris is nice, and it includes the definition of Paris, like the certain region of Paris, whatever.
So the way I would do this is say Paris is nice, a topic, which may be a simple topic and it's just its label, could have, oh, by the way, relation, I have as part Paris, the city, which has its own definition, which again may be any of the above. It can be.
So, but that's what I was asking.
It can be
the has part. Does it point to anything within the topic, or it just, that's it? The relation is has part. This entire topic has part Paris.
And either it can be has part Paris, or it can be an adornment of the label, which is an adornment saying this is a part of, like, it can be associated to the text or not. Adornment is one way to identify parts.
The text being a symbol.
That gets away from the clip logic
yes, explicitly.
Of modeling. Yeah,
explicitly.
The problem with that is differentiating something like Tim likes Joe.
Yeah.
You have Tim is part, Joe is part, but the relationship within there, because where do you differentiate Joe likes Tim versus Tim likes Joe, right? You don't have the predicate structure.
Well, in the Tim like Joe sentence as it is, whether you want to formalize it or not, it's still the same topic. And you could then also have a variant of that topic, an equivalent topic where this is formalized into an asymmetric relationship, but it's in the language. And you would say Tim like Joe can be interpreted as likes Tim Joe and not as like Joe Tim in Clispish. And there's another one where it's unclear, but that's not a valid interpretation of this one, right? What I'm saying is when you take Tim like Joe, not as a symbol, but as a topic, right? It's supposed to be meaningful. If it's unclear, it's because there's multiple interpretations. For example, there'll be multiple interpretations if there's multiple Tims. Then when I say, hey, by the way, Tim is this, Tim Ryan High, born whatever, SIN whatever, that's one way of defining Tim. Then I'm being more precise about, I'm claiming that this topic A is ambiguous. So I'll replace it with one which is less ambiguous, which may be based on the same sentence, but moreover has the has part interpretation, which reduces the ambiguity because that becomes part of the sentence. Okay, no, we're getting into tomorrow's. Unfortunately,
Yeah, I have a hard stop. Yeah.
We both
Yeah.
do. So we'll get into how to build definitions tomorrow. And I'm glad I brought the parts are not always adornment as part of this, for what it's worth.
Right.
See you tomorrow.
And talk to you guys tomorrow.
Bye.